always thought South Carolina had a bunch of reserves that we didn't really have. In North Carolina, they had two major inland areas that they resupplied their ships with. One is going to be, this wall would be Virginia in this scenario. That's the Atlantic Ocean over there. Lane is sitting on some of our barrier islands. At any rate, the Roanoke River comes down, and at Plymouth, there's a major Yankee base. Buck, you're sitting in a Yankee base, so just hang on, we're going to liberate this thing. All right. But they had the Roanoke River is going down, it's emptying into the Albemarle Sound. And the Yankees have 2,500 men, 200 cavalry, 27 pieces of artillery, and they've got fortifications that are in a semicircle that go from bank to bank, and it's a pretty strong position with 27 pieces of artillery. The Yankees always presumed that they controlled the waterways, and they had ships with a lot of heavy artillery. There have been a lot of people that think that the loss of our rivers hurt us more than the blockade off the coast, and there's a lot of reasons on that. But at any rate, the South had started building gunboats, and up the Roanoke River, we started building the Albemarle. Now, as I go down the Albemarle Sound here, which by the way is 80 miles wide, 80 miles long, 25 miles wide. You go down and right here at Roanoke Island, which y'all on Roanoke Island, that's 9 miles wide, not 9 miles long, 2 miles wide. That's where the lost colony was, Sir Walter Raleigh. And the Roanoke Island is the thing that sits between Pamplico Sound, which is this body of water right here, and Albemarle Sound. And Pamplico Sound, by the way, is the largest lagoon on the eastern side of the United States, and that's just an estuary that has barrier islands or reefs that separate it from the ocean. But it's fed by the Neuse River and the Trent River, and you're sitting right on the Yankee base at New Bern, and this was their major base. They had about 7,500 Yankees there, a lot of supplies, and up at the Neuse River, we're also building a gunboat. Y'all may recall we're also building a boat on PD River. And all of these three ships, they're going to be made of wood that's hard to come by at this time. You know, there's no dried wood. They're dealing with green wood. There's no armor. So what they do is they pull up railroad tracks that are not being used. And their first problem is they can't get the railroad tracks, they can't get the railroad cars to ship these old tracks off where they can be rolled. And they're going to finally get them up to Richmond and Tredegar Iron Works. They're going to get some of them down at Selma. And they're going to take these railroad steel rails, and they're going to roll them flat to where they look like about a 2x6, about 10 feet long. And that's going to turn out to be their armor. Now, the first problem was drilling holes in each end of the armor where you could bolt it to the ship. So in the beginning, they had a steam engine, and it would really just kind of grind through. And it would take a little over an hour per hole. And the modern twist drill was actually invented by Southerners to make that process go quicker. And they came up with what we would look at as a modern twist drill, where they could create those holes in about 18 minutes. So all of these gunboats are armed with 6.4-inch double-banded Brook rifles. And these are some of the best cannons made in the war by either side. They actually fired on a solid shot. They fired a 90-pound bolt, and it was just a cylinder flat on both ends. It wasn't rounded. They left it flat where it would reduce the ricochet and increase the amount of kinetic energy. And a double-banded Brook rifle had such a high muzzle velocity that it really hit much harder than even heavier Union pieces of artillery. So we're building one gunboat up here on the Neuse River. It's called the CSS Neuse. We're building another one up on the Roanoke River called the CSS Albemarle. And by the way, the Albemarle, the guy that's in charge of it is a 19-year-old Southerner. And they go through the process, and they're working in the winter of 1863, trying really hard to have these two ships ready for the spring range. And they're going to take care of the Yankees over at Plymouth in just a minute. But the big concept is to have the Neuse and to have the CSS Albemarle attack New Bern while Lee has detached 4,500 men from the Virginia campaign. It's now called Hoke's Brigade. And that's some Virginia units, and those are also some North Carolina guys that are right from this area they're going to be fighting in and familiar with the territory. But they want to have Hoke's Brigade besiege New Bern by land, and they want to have both of these gunboats. Well, what happens when the gunboats finally get ready in early April of 1864, and by the way, in February of 1864, we're all familiar with the H.L. Hunley sinking the Housatonic, the largest ship blockading around Charleston. In February 5th, the Confederates did a small boat assault on the USS Underwriter, the largest ship that was blockading around New Bern, painted black, moored right under the guns of the Yankee ship, and these plucky Confederates came up and assaulted it at night, set it on fire, blew it up, and sank it. Now, they don't like to talk about that, but that's the two biggest ones in both of those areas. Well, as the news sets out, regrettably, the CSS News gets stuck on a sandbar on its maiden voyage. So it's sitting up on the river, but it can't make it down to the projected rendezvous with the Albemarle. Now, the Albemarle's mission to come all the way down the Albemarle Sound, past Roanoke Island, and on into the Pamlico Sound, that is the longest mission ever given to any Confederate gunboat. Now, the CSS Albemarle is actually going to sink 29 Union vessels during its tour of duty, and the Noose is going to get the honor, it's still manned, it just can't move. It's going to get the honor of being the last gunboat that got a shot at Yankees as Sherman's cavalry was coming by. And by the way, it was the 55th North Carolina that was fighting them, and the Noose was firing in support of the 55th North Carolina, where they get the last shot at the Yankees. But the Albemarle doesn't know that the Noose can't make this rendezvous. So we're going to walk over to the Albemarle, and Hoke's brigade is going to attack Plymouth before they go over to New Bern. So the CSS Albemarle is completed, and it sets sail, well, it steams out April 17th, and Hoke's brigade starts attacking the Yankees at Plymouth. It's going to be a 3-day battle. The first day, the Confederates are just probing. The Yankees are pretty firm. During the winter, when the river was low, the Yankees had come out and made an obstruction of big boulders and trees and stuff like that. And they had one very heavy battery that they hoped that, because they knew the Noose was being built, they hoped that the Noose would come down, have trouble with that barrier, be very vulnerable to that gun. Well, the spring rains had come, and the Albemarle was 158 feet long, and it was 30 feet wide. It had a 9-foot draft. The CSS Virginia, by comparison, had a 21-foot draft. So the Yankees didn't really know exactly what we were going to be constructing. But there was 10 feet of clearance because of the spring rains above the barrier that they built. So the Albemarle comes down. They ignore the heavy gun that opens up on them. They just leave the hatches shut, steam past it, and they come down and they run into 2 Yankee schooners that are cabled and chained together. And the Yankees have 2 ships side by side in the channel, thinking that Albemarle surely cannot get outside of the channel. The one on one side is the Northfield. It's like 208 feet long. Both these ships are about 35 feet wide. And it's tied up to the USS Miami. And these are what are called double enders. The Yankees had the concept of having steamships that had 2 paddle wheels. And they had a runner in the front and the rear, so they have these long ships, 200 feet long. They're not going to be able to turn around in the rivers, so they don't have to. They can just reverse and go back and forth, kind of like an engine on a track. So the Albemarle does not have to stay in the channel because the spring rains are up. So the commander, Captain James Cook of the Albemarle, swings wide, and he comes in and he rams the Northfield, which is the flagship of the river blockading squadron. And they hit so hard that the Albemarle goes in and gets stuck into the side of the Yankee ship. And the Yankee ship is sitting there sinking, and the Albemarle can't back out. Well, the guys over on the Miami, they're over there trying to cut those chains. They now see why that wasn't such a good idea after all. They're doing their best to cut those chains. The Miami finally gets free, and it comes by and it lays one broadside, the first broadside that the armor's going to take. And the armor, it's being shot from like 40 feet, completely protects the ship. There's a couple guys wounded inside, but the Albemarle's armor proves good. And then the Miami comes and They turn back around, they've got one bow gun, it's an 80-pounder. They also have like one 9-inch Dahlgren, and they've got 4 24-pound howitzers. That's what's on these small double enders. There's 3 of them. So the Miami comes back, and their brave Captain Flosser, I can't remember his name exactly, but he gets up on the bow gun to aim it himself. And one of the most important or well-known shots of the war, from close range, they should have been firing a solid shot, but they've got a shell put into this front Parrott gun. They fire a shell. Now, the sides of the Albemarle are about 30 degrees, but it's a weird angle. That shot hits the Albemarle with a big clang, and it's like a pop fly to third base. And those gunners, including the captain, are there. And I'm quite sure, you know, those fuses going, they can see that baby coming right down on them. And it comes down and it kills the captain of the Miami and the entire gun crew, hand of God. And the Miami sees the error of their ways, and they start going down the Roanoke River, and they're heading for the Sound, and they're out of there. So the Albemarle comes in. Now, bear in mind that this Yankee fort had been constructed with the assumption that the Yankees would control the water. Well, now the Albemarle has just got the back of those cannons, you know, a straight shot at them. So one shot from the Albemarle, and there goes one battery, and one shot from the other gun. I mean, there's only 2 guns on it. They've got 3 portals. They can put it out to the side, they can put it out in the front, they can put it out the other side. But after 4 or 5 shots of both guns, taking out 8 batteries, the Yankees were always very well supplied, especially with white flags. They popped up about 6 white flags at the same time. And we end up capturing 2,500 Yankees, 200 horses, which were of greater value to us. And we get a large supply of really good coal. You know, most of these Confederate gunships, we're burning wood. The Yankees have brought down really high-grade coal, the hard stuff, whatever that's called, I've forgotten. Knew in the 8th grade. But at any rate, we also get thousands of pounds of bacon. And the Yankees had scuttled one ship at the dock called the Bombshell. It was just a trawler. And the Confederates are going to spend 4 days there, and they refloat the Bombshell, and they get 1 cannon on it just for looks more than anything else, and they load that primarily with coal. It's got a 37-man crew, and they've also got a traditional paddle wheeler called the Cotton Plant, and the Cotton Plant has got about 115 Confederate soldiers, and they're going to be like an amphibious force, and they're thinking that maybe they might have to land those Confederates on the island out there, and they don't know exactly what they're going to need them for, but they've got 3 vessels. They've got the infantry on the paddle wheeler, they've got the Albemarle, and they've got the Bombshell with a lot of coal, and all the ships have like thousands of pounds of bacon that we liberated from the Yankees. So this is where, after taking Plymouth, by the way, there was another little small group of Yankees on the Tar River, where the Tar River comes back into the Roanoke River. They leave as soon as they hear the big base has surrendered. They leave in the night. We don't have to deal with them. So now, the Albemarle, the Bombshell, and the Cotton Plant set up, and they go down the Roanoke River, and they come into Albemarle Sound, and they discover the Miami and 2 other small double enders laying mines. And as soon as they see the Confederate flotilla, they start, you know, hauling what? And the Albemarle is chugging along on a good calm sea. We can make 4 knots, but we've got the tide with us, so we're making about 7 knots here. And we're going down, and those 3 small double enders, what they're doing is they're running back to the main Yankee fleet, which is really exactly the way the Roman sea tactics used to be. Get somebody to chase them, run back to your big ships. These big ships are much bigger displacement. They're also double enders, and all these double enders are fast, by the way. They can go 14 knots on a flat sea. So the large double enders, they've got 2 bow Parrott guns, 100-pounders. They've got 4 9-inch Dahlgrens, and they've got 4 24-pound howitzers. I mean, these things have got a lot of firepower. They're not armored, but they've got a lot of firepower. So there's 3 big ones, there's 3 little ones, and there's 2 gunboats, the Whitehead and something else. And this is going to be a 3-hour battle. And during this battle, those 8 Yankee ships are going to fire at the Albemarle over 500 times. So I mean, you can just imagine what's going on all around the Albemarle the entire time. If they're close, they're going to be getting broadsides. they're getting shells. The only real damage that's happening is to the smokestack of the Albemarle, and anybody that's ever had a wood stove, you know you've got to have a certain amount of vertical stuff to get that thing to draw. So that's going to come back to us. But the Albemarle, when they get down and they see, okay, there are 8 of them, I think we're going to turn around. Well, we lose all of our momentum because now we're going against the tide, so we're really probably making all of 2 knots. And the flagship of the larger squadron, the Massachusetts, however they pronounce that, it's a real large one with a lot of firepower. It comes up broadside to the Albemarle and just lays a broadside into the Albemarle. It's a lot of firepower, but it basically bounces off. We get a few more men wounded inside. The Albemarle's got a crew of like 140 men, something like that. So then all of a sudden, both side hatches open up on the Albemarle. And for the first time, the Yankees are going to get a taste of 2 guns at once. And the first shots go through one of the steam engines of the flagship of the blockading fleet, the Massachusetts. So it like just peels off to the right. It's not sinking, but it's out of commission. Next comes the CSS Miami that we dealt with the day before, or 4 days before. Now the Miami has got a spar torpedo on the front of it. I guess they picked up a little something from the Hunley. So the Miami is charging for the Albemarle with a spar torpedo on front, and one of the first shots tears off part of the bridge, wounds about 6 Yankees, tears off some lifeboats. The second shot hits their front rudder, and all of a sudden the Miami cannot be controlled, so it's not sinking, but that's the second of the 8 ships that are out of action. By this time, the USS Sassacus, which is one of those big double-enders, going 14 knots, it rams into the side of the Albemarle, just like the Albemarle had gone into the side, but it has risen up on top of the front of the Albemarle. It's not sticking in it, it's on top of it. So the Yankee ship has got both of those side paddle wheels going as hard as it can to keep on top of the Albemarle. The Albemarle is doing what it can to back away, but it's not getting away. And there's 3 other Yankee ships. Now, had any one of those Yankee ships come up there and also hit the Albemarle, the thing would have gone down like a rock, because they'd already gotten to where on the front gun port there was actually water. When there was a high wave, there was water coming into the Albemarle. And if you know anything about those ironclads, they did not have much buoyancy. So things were close. The Albemarle, when it first went into action, it ran up a pennant. I don't know if it was a red pennant or what, but it was a signal to the cotton plant and to the bombshell to turn away, go back upriver to safety. The paddle wheeler with the infantry, the cotton plant, did go back up the Roanoke River like it should have, but the little stud that was in charge of the bombshell, he started shelling the Yankee ships. And at first, these large Yankee ships with this little insignificant coal boat with 1 gun on it, they didn't actually realize where the fire was coming from. They were taking some shells. So all these Yankees, these 3 Yankees, see that little son of a gun. So they go down to take care of the cotton plant, the bombshell, and they're gonna hit it, and they don't sink it, but they disable it, they make it surrender. But that bought the Albemarle enough time to winch one of its guns out in the port, only 20 feet away from the Sassacus, which is trying to sink it. And the first shot goes right into one of its steam engines, and steam escapes, and there's Yankees scalded, and the paddle wheels stop, and the Yankees slip off the side. So the Albemarle, this a 3-hour battle, I've summed it up here. As we try to go back home, there's so much loss of air from the chimney that we're just about to stop. And if we lose power, we're going to go down because they're going to deal with us. When one of the Confederates realizes, we've got thousands of pounds of bacon, and bacon fat will burn without draft. So they start throwing the bacon into the fire. I'm not making this up. You've heard of bringing home the bacon. This is the first time the bacon brought us home. And so they threw in thousands of pounds of bacon, and they were able to build up enough steam that the Albemarle was able to make it back up to the mouth of the Roanoke River. And then they turned back around to face the Union fleet. And the Union fleet thought, well, we'll come back tomorrow. So the Union fleet They go back down, and they're planning to come back up in the morning, better organized, and finish these guys off. Well, in the night, those Confederates on the Albemarle, very slowly and with great labor, they chugged back up to where they had sank the Sassacus when they rammed it, and that was in a river, and it just sat down. The chimney is only underwater about this much at the base. So they took the smokestack off of the Union vessel, put it on the Confederate vessel. So the next morning when the Yankees come back up, they see the Albemarle steaming back up and down and up and down and up and down, and they choose not to engage. And for the rest of the war, the Albemarle is up that river threatening, and it would come out occasionally. The Albemarle turns out to be the only Confederate ironclad that was sunk by enemy action, because in October of '64, it was sitting at his pier, and a brave Yankee had gone up and observed that the log boom that was around it had gotten waterlogged, it had sunk down, there was green mold on it, and he got a steam-powered boat, small one with a spar torpedo, and was able to hit the ironclad while it was at dock, with nobody on it, and sink it. So the Albemarle was the only Confederate ironclad to be sunk by enemy action, and the Noose over there was the one that got the last shot at them. But that was what we did get the Yankees out of Plymouth. We got them out of the Tar River base. We were not able to deal with them at Newbern. About that time, Grant started his overland campaign they call Hoke's Brigade back up north, and that's that part of the water war in North Carolina. Thank you.